Okay, this is Jerry Carvassier here, and we're taking a look at what we call the Adobe Camera Raw, or the ACR dialog box for processing raw images. Specifically, this tool can be used for TIFFs, JPEGs, or RAWs, but primarily I use it for raw processing. The advantage here is that we can have kind of an expanded dynamic range, as well as make some interesting adjustments with the new version of Adobe Camera Raw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this in small segments and just give you kind of a quick overview on some of the basic features currently. And so what I would do is initially is to turn this toggle right here where it says full screen mode. I'll hit the F key on the keyboard, or just click on this little icon within the Adobe Camera Raw dialog box here. So we have an image here from the Albuquerque Balloon Festival, and we can see that there's some blue and some red areas within the image. Well, that's an indicator to me that the shadow clipping and highlight clipping indicators are turned on. These two triangles in the upper right hand corner of the dialog box where the histogram is. Very helpful in that we can start to take down the highlights by hitting this recovery slider, and as we push the recovery slider to the right, you'll notice that the red disappears. So we've maintained a bit of detail. There was a very small spike in the histogram over here, and as we turn that up, we start to lose that spike, and it recovers some of that highlight detail that lacks information. Same thing applies to the shadow information here. If we turn the black slider down, you can see some of those blues will start to disappear. That's the indicator for lack of detail in the shadows. So I'm going to drag that all the way over to the left here as well. Now, that's just some basic adjustments associated with the highlights and shadows. And if you look to the dialog box up here, you can see that there's information associated with exposure. 2/50th of a second at f5.6 with an ISO 200 with a 10mm lens. Okay, now what we'd like to do is to set up our workflow options and make that workflow option be how the file will be transferred into Photoshop if we want to continue to work with the image in Photoshop at some point. So we click down here what looks to be like a web link, and it brings up the workflow options dialog box. The space that we're going to work with, the suggested space, as I talked about earlier, was the ProPhoto RGB. The bit depth is 16-bit. We want to stay in 16-bit with making our adjustments as long as possible. And then the size relationship here is the megapixel size of your camera. That's the one that doesn't have any plus or minus signs associated with it. If you wanted to reduce the size of the file as you take it into Photoshop, or increase the size of the file as you take it into Photoshop, good place to do it is right here. And then what we'll do is we'll stick to the 300 pixels per inch resolution, which is kind of a standard within the industry, and we'll say OK. Now, being that this is a raw file, we can make a variety of different white balance changes. I'm happy with the white balance selected currently, so I'm not going to change that. We can make some temperature adjustments, some tint adjustments. Happy with the current condition of the image, don't really need to change that. Now, the exposure information can be changed easily with these sliders. Okay, easily done there. The recovery we talked about, where we took out some of those red highlight clipping indicators. And if I bring up the fill light just a little bit, I can kind of fill some of that foreground information that's going on, and it's going to fill or brighten the image kind of overall. Okay. Brightness and contrast are two other options as well. I think we're fine where we're at currently, and there is a clarity feature that's built into the Adobe ACR. The negative clarity will give you very soft looking results, and the positive clarity will give you a boost to the mid-tone contrast within the image, and I kind of like that one. You see what it's doing to the clouds there. I'm going to bump that up just a little bit to about 40. Now there is a vibrance feature too. It's not quite as aggressive as the saturation, but Vibrance is really a nice high quality introduction of information for color in the image. So notice what's happening to those blue skies up there. I kind of like that. I'll take it up to about 30 on that as well. Saturation's a bit too aggressive for me. It's just kind of like working with a meat axe approach, but if you wanted to just give it a touch, sometimes it works well. But I think the Vibrance seems to work better these days in working with Adobe Camera Raw.